Behind the beats and chart-topping hits, hip-hop's fiercest rivalries have shaped the culture that we know today. From street battles to global fame, these are the most iconic rap wars ever. Ice Cube versus N.W.A. So by the end of the 1980s, N.W.A. already rocked hip-hop to its core. Raw, unapologetic, fearlessly exposing life in Compton. But behind the fame and platinum, tension was brewing. Ice Cube, the youngest member and the mastermind behind most of the lyrics, realized he wasn't getting his fair share of the money. In 1989, manager Jerry Heller offered him $75,000, a fortune to some, but far less than Ice Cube deserved. Now, he had just helped N.W.A. go platinum and he refused. Now, that bold move changed everything. Looking for creative freedom, Cube moved east and teamed up with the Bomb Squad, Public Enemy's legendary producers. In 1990, he released America's Most Wanted. Now, the album went platinum, proving Cube could dominate on his own. N.W.A. struck first with 100 Miles of Running, calling him Benedict Arnold. The provocation meant to ignite a response, and Cube didn't hold back. In 1991, he released No Vaseline, a scathing, precise, and unforgettable diss that targeted the group and Jerry Heller alike. DJ Yella later admitted that they had planned a response, but after hearing No Vaseline, it never came up. Then, by 1992, N.W.A. had crumbled. Ice Cube had not only survived the split, but rose to solo superstardom. No Vaseline became a model for diss tracks, demonstrating that in hip-hop, an empire could be destroyed by one sharp, brave, and unrelenting voice. Dr. Dre versus Eazy-E. Alright, so by the early 90s, N.W.A.'s empire was cracking. Dre, the mastermind behind their biggest hits, felt trapped at Ruthless Records and was creating platinum records but seeing very little respect or money out of it. And at the same time, Eazy-E remained faithful to Jerry Heller, who managed the money, which set everything up for an inevitable confrontation. In 91, Suge Knight appeared. Now, he decided that Dre shouldn't be under contract like Eazy-E and used threats in order to persuade Dre to leave. Dre left Ruthless and began a new label called Death Row Records, which was designed to take aim at the West. In 92, he released The Chronic, which reshaped the G-Funk, and his song Dre Day took clear shots at Eazy-E, laughing at his monetary status, his relevance, and his role at Ruthless, all while showing a lookalike in the video that was later humiliated in Dre's video of Eazy-E on Dre Day. Eazy-E struck back in 93 with real motherfucking G's, calling Dre a studio gangster and reclaiming his street cred. Now, the irony of all this is pretty deep. Eazy was still profiting from Dre's publishing while he was handing them public insults. Interviews, subliminals, and media coverage fueled the feud, turning a business dispute into one of hip-hop's most famous beefs. By 95, the fire cooled as Eazy-E was diagnosed with AIDS. Before his death, Dre and Eazy reportedly reconciled, bringing a human ending to a bitter chapter. Now, their rivalry proved that in hip-hop, genius, money, and loyalty could collide, leaving behind one of the most unforgettable West Coast showdowns in history. DJ Quik versus MC Eiht. In the streets of Compton in the early 90s, music and gang politics was inseparable. DJ Quik representing the Treetop Peru and MC Eiht tied to the Trackanoo Park Compton Crips. They weren't just rappers, man, they were symbols of neighborhood pride and street power. Now, their rivalry wasn't about chart positions or record deals. It was about respect, credibility, and survival in a city where every single move could spark conflict. Now, this all began quietly, nearly undetectable to the general public. Subliminal shots surfaced on early tapes that were sly but sharp enough for an insider to replace. Now, the pressure was starting to build. By 95, DJ Quik released Dollars and Cents, a song that dealt blows against MC Eiht. From calling him Outflow, his name, to his street cred, he came for MC Eiht hard. Then Eiht delivered their response, recording and releasing the Death Wish series, all installments being bleak, crispy, and personal, transforming the conflict into a war of lyrics. Now, this wasn't just entertainment. Every single verse carried weight in the streets, where friends and rivals listened carefully. Interviews, live shows, and tape exchanges turned into battlegrounds, while conflict endured for most of the 90s. The diss tracks were vicious and sometimes breached the line from music to unfiltered personal attacks, and the legend reflected the magnitude of street life in the West Coast. Eventually, the rivalry diminished, but it remained a factor that signified the potential for a local gang rivalry to spill over into mainstream hip-hop, necessitating artistic ability and more careful and composed diss tracks. Tupac versus Biggie. And once upon a time, these young brothers was friends, but they would become the faces of the most infamous rivalry in hip-hop history. In the early 90s, both of these dudes was rising stars, but the whole East Coast-West Coast feud was amplified by Death Row and Bad Boy Records. Now, that whole thing was a powder keg waiting to explode. Everything changed in November of '94. Tupac arrived at Quad Studios in New York to record a verse and was ambushed by armed assailants. Now, the guy survived 5 gunshot wounds, but the incident shook him to the core. Now, Pac suspected that Biggie's camp knew about the attack and did nothing to stop it, interpreting his silence as betrayal. By '95, Biggie's "Who Shot You" dropped. Though he claimed it wasn't about Tupac, the timing made it feel personal, fueling the flames of a feud that would soon engulf the nation. Tupac, freshly released from prison in '95, signed with Death Row Records and went on the offensive. In '96, Hit 'Em Up dropped, a track so aggressive it ripped through the bad boy camp, calling out Biggie, calling out Puffy, and all-day affiliates, even claiming affairs and personal betrayals. Biggie stayed measured, responding mostly through subliminals, including "Long Kiss Goodnight," but the tension only escalated. Now, that feud turned deadly. In September of '96, Tupac was murdered in Las Vegas. 6 months later, Biggie was killed in LA. Both cases remain unsolved. Now, make sure y'all hit that like and subscribe if a rap beef ever has you choosing sides. Alright, next up, 50 Cent versus The Game. In 2005, a story that began with mentorship turned into one of the most notorious internal rap label feuds in history. 50 Cent had launched The Game's career with G-Unit, giving him a platform, giving him hits and industry backing. Now, on paper, they was inseparable, an unstoppable duo dominating charts and stages. But behind the scenes, loyalty cracks started to show up. Now, The Game refused to fully engage in 50 Cent's ongoing battles with rivals like Ja Rule, Nas, and Fat Joe. What started off as caution was interpreted by 50 as betrayal. Tensions exploded on air at Hot 97 in March of '05, where 50 publicly announced that The Game was kicked out of G-Unit. Now, that very night, a shootout outside the station left the hip-hop world shocked and set the stage for a feud that would dominate headlines. The Game retaliated with an unyielding onslaught. His 300 bars and running freestyle lasted over 15 minutes without deviation from concept. He kept the assault alive by doing live performances, graph-style posters, and calling out 50 publicly each time he appeared. In fact, everything Game did became a war front. Now, 50 responded with disses, interviews, skits, and calculated troll activity to make the feud a part of his brand identity. Songs like Back Down's a punchline-level shot, revealing how serious the rivalry was. Now, this feud showcased how internal label conflicts could escalate into headline-grabbing, career-defining sagas. Drake vs. Meek Mill. In 2015, a single tweet ignited a feud that set hip-hop and social media ablaze. Meek Mill accused Drake of using a ghostwriter, claiming Quentin Miller was behind his chart-topping hits, a public strike at Drake's credibility and street cred. Now, Drake fired back immediately with Charged Up, but the real knockout came days later with Back to Back. Now, that track wasn't just a diss, it became a club anthem, a radio staple and a viral sensation, with every line turned into memes and dissected online. Drake weaved in understated Canadian pride with references to the Toronto Blue Jays' defeat of Philadelphia that served to escalate the quarrel while simultaneously amusing the audience. Meek Mill responded with "Wanna Know," but didn't have the same element of impact or circulation momentum. But the feud was more than just entertainment. It highlighted how modern rap beefs have evolved in the social media age, in which tweets, memes, and streaming numbers can escalate beef quicker than traditional tracks ever could. Now, 3 years later in 2018, the war officially ended with a public reconciliation. Drake and Meek Mill performed Going Bad side by side, suits on, looking less like rivals and more like allies. Ain't no beef list complete without talking about Drake versus Kendrick Lamar. The conflict between these two dudes has been occurring since 2013, during which Kendrick made waves with his Control verse that famously challenged Drake, stating that he was the king of hip-hop. Now, Drake didn't respond at first in a blatant way, but tossed out some subliminal shots on tracks, the language and Tuscan leather, which kept their tension like a chess match. Kendrick fired back with a Heart Part 4, hinting at ghostwriting and questioning Drake's authenticity. Now, for years, it was quiet war beneath the surface, until 2024, when the feud erupted into one of the most viral rap beefs in recent memory. Kendrick dropped hits like That, Euphoria, and Meet the Grams, all went straight for Drake, while Drake countered with tailor-made freestyles, push-up challenges, and even AI-generated voices of Snoop Dogg and Tupac, turning the feud into a full-blown creative spectacle. It was more than a battle between bars, it was a public exhibition of strategy, innovation, and performance. Streams went through the roof, verses filled to the brim, and fans dissected every line every time. The Drake-Kendrick saga shows us that today's hip-hop beefs ain't simply about disrespect. It's a high-stakes mixture of music and tech combined with social media culture to keep the world hooked with every line. Now, these rap wars didn't just make headlines, they changed hip-hop forever. If y'all enjoy these rap wars, make sure to like and subscribe for deeper dives.